Have you ever felt like giving up on love, on English, or just on getting out of bed? Like nothing you try works, and you're secretly exhausted? This video is my real story, married at 20 in America, broke, confused, and almost broken. But I stayed. I learned love through struggle. And if my messy life can turn around, so can yours. No fairy tales. Just truth. Keep watching. The question that woke me up. Imagine this. It's 6 in the morning. You haven't slept well for 3 days. Your toddler just threw a banana at the wall, your baby is crying for no reason. And your husband is silently scrolling his phone at the kitchen table. You look at him. He looks at you. Neither of you says a word. And in that exact second, a question pops into your head. Not a deep philosophical question. A dangerous one. You think, can love actually survive this? Or are we just two tired people sharing a lease? That question terrified me. Because I didn't have an answer. I got married when I was 20 years old. Right here in the United States. Not because I was pregnant. Not because I was rich. Not because my parents forced me. I got married because I was young and stupid in the most beautiful way possible. I thought love was a feeling. I thought if you really loved someone, everything would just work. Like magic. Like the movies. Spoiler alert, it doesn't. The first year of my marriage was not a montage of cute breakfasts and sunset walks. It was a montage of grocery store arguments, weird silences, and me crying in the bathroom pretending to take a shower. I remember standing under hot water one night, asking myself, why does this feel so hard? I love him. He loves me. So why do I feel so alone? That's the question nobody tells you about. Nobody warns you that love and struggle can live in the exact same house, eat at the exact same table, and sleep in the exact same bed. And if you're watching this right now, maybe you felt that too. Maybe you're learning English and you feel stuck. Maybe you're in a relationship that's falling apart. Maybe you're just tired of trying and failing at everything. I want you to know something. That question, can love survive? Is not a sign that your relationship is over. It's a sign that you're finally being honest. Here's what I learned the hard way. Your brain is wired to avoid pain. When you struggle in English, when you can't find the right word, when you feel stupid in front of a native speaker, your brain doesn't think, oh, I'm learning. Your brain thinks, danger, run away. The same thing happens in marriage. When you fight, when you feel unheard, when you're exhausted, your brain wants to escape. It wants to scroll, to sleep, to leave. Not because you're a bad person. Because you're human. But here's the twist. Struggle is not the enemy. Struggle is the classroom. And most people quit right before the lesson ends. I almost quit. 3 times. The first time was over a $14 grocery bill. I'll tell you that story in a minute. The second time was after my first child was born. And the third time was when I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize myself anymore. But I didn't quit. And I'm not special. I'm just someone who learned that love, like English, like any skill, is not a feeling. It's a practice. A small, boring, daily practice. So let me ask you the same question I asked myself that morning under the shower. Are you willing to stop waiting for love to feel easy? Are you willing to struggle and stay? If your answer is yes, then keep watching. Because this story is not just about me. It's about you too. And I promise you, by the end of this video, you won't see struggle the same way again. Let's start at the beginning. The day I said, I do, at 20 years old, with no money, no plan, and no idea what I was getting into. Married at 20, sounds crazy, right? Let me take you back to a hot July afternoon in Oregon. I was 20 years old, wearing a white dress I bought on clearance for $40. My now husband was wearing a suit he borrowed from his uncle. We had exactly $700 in our bank account. No ring. No honeymoon. No plan. And honestly, I was terrified. But I smiled for the photos, and I said, I do, like I actually knew what those words meant. Spoiler, I had no idea. Here's what I didn't tell anyone that day. The real reason I got married at 20 wasn't because I was madly in love. I mean, I was in love. But that's not why I said yes. The real reason was way dumber. I was lonely. I had moved to the United States not long before, and everything felt foreign. Not just the language. The way people talked, the way they laughed, the way they looked at you when you made a grammar mistake. I felt like I was walking around with a sign on my forehead that said, I don't belong here. And then I met him. A guy who didn't care if my English was perfect. A guy who thought my accent was cute instead of annoying. A guy who made me feel like I wasn't a complete mess. So when he asked me to marry him, I didn't think. I just jumped. Because being with him felt safer than being alone in a country that still confused me every single day. Sounds romantic, right? It wasn't. It was desperate. And desperate love is like building a house on sand. It looks fine until the first storm comes. The storm came faster than I expected. 3 months after the wedding, we had our first real fight. Not a cute, you left the toilet seat up, fight. A real one. We were at a grocery store. I put a box of cereal in the cart. He looked at the price and put it back. I asked why. He said, we can't afford it. I felt my face get hot. Not because I needed that cereal. But because in that moment, I realized something I didn't want to admit. We were poor. Not, we need to budget, poor. We can't buy cereal, poor. I didn't say anything in the store. I waited until we got home. And then I exploded. I said things I didn't mean. He said things he didn't mean. And at the end of the night, I sat on the bathroom floor crying, asking myself, did I make a mistake? Should I have just stayed lonely? That's the thing nobody tells you about marrying young. You don't know yourself yet. You don't know what you need. You don't know how to fight fair. You don't know that love is not just a feeling, it's a skill. And like any skill, you have to learn it. Slowly. Painfully. One mistake at a time. Here's where the science comes in. Your brain doesn't fully develop until you're about 25. The part that controls impulse, long-term planning, and emotional regulation? That's the prefrontal cortex. And at 20, mine was basically a wet noodle. I wasn't making a smart decision when I got married. I was making an emotional decision. And emotional decisions feel great in the moment. But they don't always survive real life. So why am I telling you this? Not to scare you. Not to say young marriage is bad. I'm still married, by the way. 11 years now. So clearly, it can work. But it only worked because I stopped pretending. I stopped pretending that love was enough. I stopped pretending that struggle meant failure. And I started doing something most people never do. I started practicing. Think about learning English. When you first started, you couldn't say anything. You felt stupid. You wanted to quit. But then you learned one word. Then one sentence. Then one conversation. And slowly, painfully, you got better. Love is exactly the same. You don't start as an expert. You start as a beginner. And beginners make mistakes. They say the wrong thing. They misunderstand. They get frustrated. The difference between people who succeed and people who quit? The people who succeed don't expect it to be easy. They expect the struggle. And they stay anyway. After that grocery store fight, I had a choice. I could leave. Or I could stay and learn. I chose to stay. Not because I was brave. Because I was too stubborn to admit I made a mistake. But stubbornness is not a strategy. So I had to figure out how to actually make this marriage work. And that's when I discovered something that changed everything. I discovered that small words, tiny, simple words, could fix almost anything. Sorry. Thank you. I was wrong. I see you. That hurt me. These aren't fancy English words. They're not academic. But they are the most powerful words in any language. And I didn't know how to use them. Not really. I knew the translations. But I didn't know how to say them and mean them when I was angry. That's the real challenge of learning a language. It's not grammar. It's not vocabulary. It's emotional vocabulary. Can you say, I'm hurting, instead of screaming? Can you say, I need a minute, instead of slamming a door? Can you say, I love you, even when you're angry? Most people can't. I couldn't. So I had to learn. And the only way to learn is to practice when it's hard. Not when it's easy. Anyone can be loving on a sunny day. The test is the rainy day. The test is the $14 cereal box. The test is the silent car ride home after a fight. So here's what I want you to take away from this section. If you're watching this and you feel like you're failing, at English, at love, at life, stop expecting it to be easy. It's not supposed to be easy. Struggle is not a sign that you're doing something wrong. Struggle is a sign that you're doing something real. The question is not, can love survive challenges? The question is, are you willing to be bad at it until you get good? I was bad at marriage for years. Really bad. But I stayed. And slowly, I got less bad. And then one day, I looked up and realized, we were actually okay. Not perfect. Not a fairy tale. Just two people who learned how to struggle together instead of alone. And that, my friend, is the secret that no one puts on a wedding invitation. So let me ask you again. Are you willing to be bad at something until you get good? Or do you want to quit and stay exactly where you are? Your answer to that question will decide everything. The first year wasn't a fairy tale. Let me tell you something embarrassing. On my first wedding anniversary, I locked myself in the bathroom and cried for 20 minutes. Not because my husband forgot. He didn't. He bought flowers. He made dinner. He did everything right. I cried because I felt nothing. Zero. Nada. I looked at him across the table and thought, is this it? Is this what forever feels like? Because forever feels boring. And hard. And not at all what I signed up for. I know that sounds terrible. But I'm being honest because someone out there needs to hear it. The first year of marriage, at least my first year, was not a fairy tale. It was not cute. It was not romantic. It was a slow, quiet, exhausting disappointment. And I thought that meant I had failed. Here's what actually happened. After the wedding, after the cake and the photos and the awkward dance with my father-in-law, we went home to our tiny one-bedroom apartment. The kind with thin walls and a landlord who never fixed the leaky faucet. And suddenly, all the excitement was gone. Replaced by questions like, who's taking out the trash? Why did you spend $10 on coffee? Can you please stop leaving your socks on the floor? Romantic, right? Nobody tells you that marriage is mostly logistics. It's not grand gestures. It's not dramatic apologies in the rain. It's deciding who does the dishes. It's figuring out how to split a $15 dinner bill when you both have different ideas of fair. It's being exhausted and still having to ask, how was your day, even though you don't really have the energy to listen. And if you're learning English on top of all that, forget about it. My English was okay, but not great. I could order food. I could ask for directions. But I couldn't argue. I couldn't express subtle emotions. I couldn't say, I feel invisible right now, without it coming out as, you never talk to me. And those two sentences mean completely different things. But I didn't have the words for the first one. So I used the second one. And then we fought. And then I felt even more alone. Here's a weird truth about the brain. When you don't have the words for your emotions, your brain defaults to anger. Why? Because anger is simple. Anger is loud. Anger doesn't require precision. Sadness, fear, loneliness, those are complicated. They require vocabulary. They require vulnerability. And when you're tired and stressed and your English isn't perfect, vulnerability feels impossible. So you get angry instead. And anger destroys things slowly, one sentence at a time. That was my first year. Not a fairy tale. A slow burn of small angers. A pile of unspoken feelings. And a question that kept getting louder, did I make a terrible mistake? But here's the part one didn't understand back then. The first year of anything hard is supposed to be messy. The first year of learning English, you sound like a toddler. The first year of a new job, you feel like a fraud. The first year of marriage, you fight about socks. That's not a sign of failure. That's a sign that you're doing something real. The problem is, we compare our messy first year to everyone else's highlight reel. We look at couples on Instagram feeding each cake and think, why don't we have that? We forget that those couples also fight about socks. They just don't post it. So we feel broken. And then we want to quit. I almost quit 3 times that first year. The first time was the grocery store fight I told you about. The second time was when he came home late without calling, and I convinced myself he didn't care. The third time was when I realized I didn't even like myself anymore. I was so focused on being a good wife that I forgot how to be me. And that's a dangerous place to be. Because when you lose yourself, no amount of love from someone else can fill that hole. So what changed? Nothing dramatic. No sudden realization. No movie moment. I just got tired of being tired. One night, after another stupid fight about nothing, I didn't go to the bathroom to cry. I stayed at the kitchen table. And I said something I had never said before. I said, I don't know how to do this. I'm scared. And I need help. Those words felt like throwing up. They were ugly and hard and embarrassing. But they were honest. And honesty, real, messy, uncomfortable honesty, is the only thing that actually fixes anything. Not grand gestures. Not perfect English. Not pretending everything is fine. Just small, honest sentences. He didn't have a perfect answer. He said, I'm scared too. And somehow, that was enough. Not because it solved anything. Because it reminded us that we were on the same team. Two scared, confused, 20-something kids trying to figure out life in a country that didn't come with instructions. If you're watching this and your first year of anything is a disaster, a relationship, a language, a career, I need you to hear this. You're not failing. You're just in the messy middle. And the messy middle is where real growth happens. Not in the highlight reel. Not in the fairy tale. In the quiet, ugly, ordinary moments where you choose to stay even though you want to run. So let me ask you. What's your messy middle right now? What are you pretending is fine when it's not? And what would happen if you just said the honest, ugly, embarrassing truth out loud? You don't have to fix everything today. You just have to stay at the table. That's what I did. And slowly, painfully, things started to change. Can love survive when you're broke? Let me tell you about the $14 that almost ended my marriage. I know that sounds ridiculous. $14. That's a pizza. That's 2 fancy coffees. That's literally nothing in the grand scheme of a life. But here's the thing about money when you're young and married and broke. Every dollar is a conversation. Every dollar is a vote. Every dollar is either, we're on the same team, or, I don't trust you. So here's what happened. It was a Tuesday. Nothing special. We went to the grocery store because we needed milk, eggs, and bread. Basic stuff. I grabbed a box of cereal. Not expensive cereal. The store brand. And my husband looked at the price, looked at me, and put it back on the shelf. He didn't say, we can't afford it. He said, maybe next week. But I heard what he really meant. And what I heard was, you're bad with money. You don't understand our situation. You're the reason we're struggling. None of that was true. But that's what I heard. Because when you're already insecure about your English, about your job, about your place in this country, every small rejection feels like a giant confirmation of your worst fears. So I didn't say anything in the store. I smiled. I put the cereal back. And I died a little inside. We got home. I unloaded the groceries in silence. He sat on the couch. And then I exploded. Not about the cereal. About everything. About how he never listens. About how I gave up everything to be here. About how I didn't even want to be married anymore. I said words I can't take back. He said words he can't take back. And at the end of the night, we sat on opposite ends of the couch, not touching, not talking. Just breathing the same air and pretending the other person didn't exist. That was our first real crack. And cracks, if you don't fix them, become holes. And holes become breaks. Here's what I learned later, after I stopped being angry. Money fights are almost never about money. They're about fear. They're about control. They're about respect. When my husband put that cereal back, he wasn't saying, you're bad with money. He was saying, I'm terrified that we won't make rent. But he didn't say that. Because saying that would make him feel weak. So instead, he just put the cereal back. And I, instead of asking, are you scared? I assumed the worst. And then we both acted like children. This is where the English piece comes in. And I need you to really hear this. Learning a language is not just about vocabulary and grammar. It's about learning how to ask the right question at the right time. In that moment, the right question was not, why did you put the cereal back? The right question was, are you worried about money? But I didn't have the emotional vocabulary to ask that. Because in my native language, I could ask that easily. In English, my brain was still translating. And by the time I finished translating, the moment was gone. So I just got angry instead. Here's a scientific fact that will blow your mind. When you're stressed, your brain's language center literally works slower. It's not just in your head. It's biological. Cortisol, the stress hormone, reduces your ability to access vocabulary, especially emotional vocabulary. So when you're fighting about money, your English gets worse. And when your English gets worse, you feel more frustrated. And when you feel more frustrated, you fight more. It's a beautiful, terrible cycle. So how do you break it? You don't. Not at first. At first, you just survive it. You survive the fight. You survive the silence. You survive the night on opposite ends of the couch. And then, when the cortisol goes down, you try again. You say, I'm sorry, even though you don't feel sorry yet. You say, I was scared, even though it makes you feel naked. You say, can we try again tomorrow, even though tomorrow feels so far away. That's what we did. The next morning, I made coffee. He got up. We didn't talk about the cereal. We didn't talk about the fight. We just existed in the same room. And then, around noon, he said something I'll never forget. He said, I don't want to be poor forever. And I'm scared that we will be. That was it. That was the whole truth. Not, you spend too much. Not, you don't understand money. Just, I'm scared. And suddenly, I wasn't angry anymore. I was sad. Sad for him. Sad for us. Sad that $14 of cereal could make two people feel so small. Here's the lesson that took me years to learn. Love doesn't survive because you never fight. Love survives because you learn how to fight and then come back. You learn how to say, I was wrong, before your pride kills everything. You learn how to say, I'm scared, instead of, you're the problem. And you learn that being broke is temporary, but being broken is a choice. We were broke for a long time. Years. We ate a lot of rice and beans. We didn't go on vacations. We drove a car that smelled weird and made strange noises. But we stopped fighting about cereal. Not because we got rich. Because we learned that the cereal was never the point. The point was, are we a team or are we enemies? And we decided, slowly, imperfectly, to be a team. If you're watching this and you're struggling with money, with English, with a relationship that feels like it's cracking, I need you to hear this. The crack is not the end. The crack is the signal. It's your brain, your body, your heart telling you that something needs attention. Not a fight. Not an explosion. Just attention. A quiet conversation. A honest sentence. I'm scared, instead of a, you always. That $14 cereal box taught me more about love than any wedding vow ever did. Because love, real love, is not about never being broke. It's about being broke together and still choosing each other at the end of the day. So let me ask you. What's your cereal box? What small thing is actually a big thing wearing a disguise? And are you brave enough to ask the real question instead of just getting angry? I learned to say sorry like a real adult. Here's something nobody tells you about saying sorry. It's not about the words. It's about the 3 seconds before you open your mouth. Those 3 seconds are where everything lives. Your pride. Your fear. Your secret belief that if you apologize, you lose. And let me be honest with you, for the first 2 years of my marriage, I would rather have chewed glass than say sorry first. I'm not proud of that. But it's true. I had this stupid idea that apologizing meant I was weak. It meant I was wrong. It meant he won and I lost. And because I already felt small in so many ways, small in my English, small in my job, small in a country that wasn't mine, I couldn't afford to feel small in my marriage too. So I held on to my pride like a drowning person holds onto a rock. Except the rock was also drowning me. Here's what that looked like in real life. We'd have a fight. Nothing dramatic. Just the usual stupid stuff. He'd say something thoughtless. I'd say something sharper. Then silence. Then the Cold War. You know the Cold War, right? It's when you're both in the same room but you're not really there. You're just two ghosts haunting the same apartment, waiting for the other ghost to blink first. And I was good at waiting. Really good. I could go days without talking. Not because I wasn't hurt. Because I was too proud to show it. I wanted him to feel my silence. I wanted him to suffer the way I was suffering. I wanted him to come to me first, to say sorry first, to prove that he loved me more than I loved him. That's so embarrassing to admit now. But I'm telling you because maybe you've done the same thing. Maybe you're doing it right now, with your partner, with your English practice, with your own damn self. Waiting for someone else to save you. Waiting for someone else to say the hard thing first. Here's what I learned. Waiting is not strength. Waiting is fear dressed up as dignity. The person who apologizes first is not the weaker person. They're the braver person. Because they're willing to look stupid, to be wrong, to be vulnerable, all for the sake of fixing something broken. And that's not weakness. That's the strongest thing a human can do. So how did I learn this? Not from a book. Not from a therapist. From a 3-year-old. I was at a park near our apartment. This was maybe a year after the cereal incident. I was pushing my son on a swing, still angry about some stupid fight from the night before. Still holding my grudge like a precious jewel. And this little boy, maybe 3 years old, ran up to another kid, grabbed his toy, and made him cry. The mom came over, knelt down, and said something so simple I almost laughed. She said, "Say sorry. It's just 2 sounds. You can do it." And the little boy, with his messy face and his runny nose, looked at the other kid and said, "Sorry. That's it. No drama. No pride. No, I'm sorry but you started it. Just sorry." And then they went back to playing like nothing happened. I sat there on that park bench and felt like the biggest idiot in America. Here I was, a grown woman, unable to do what a 3-year-old just did. Because my pride was bigger than my love. And that's not a flex. That's a tragedy. That night, I went home. I didn't wait for him to apologize first. I walked into the kitchen, stood next to him while he was washing dishes, and said, "I'm sorry I was cold today. I was scared." And I didn't know how to say that. His hands stopped moving. He turned off the water. And he said, "I'm sorry too. I was scared too." And that was it. The fight didn't matter anymore. The words didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that someone went first. And that someone, for the first time in our marriage, was me. Here's the science part, because I know you like this. When you apologize, something actually changes in your brain and the other person's brain. Oxytocin, the bonding hormone, goes up. Cortisol, the stress hormone, goes down. Your heart rate slows. Your shoulders relax. Your nervous system literally shifts from fight or flight to rest and digest. That's not poetry. That's biology. A real apology is not just nice. It's medicine. But here's the catch. It only works if you mean it. Fake apologies, the "I'm sorry you feel that way" kind, actually make things worse. Because your brain can smell insincerity from a mile away. We're wired for authenticity. We know when someone is just saying words to end a fight. And that kind of apology doesn't lower cortisol. It raises it. So learning to say sorry like an adult meant learning to mean it. And meaning it meant letting go of my need to be right. That was the hard part. Not the words. The letting go. I started small. I practiced saying sorry for little things. Sorry I left the milk out. Sorry I snapped at you this morning. Sorry I forgot to call. Just small, low-stakes apologies. And every time I said one, I noticed something. The world didn't end. He didn't think less of me. If anything, he got softer. Kinder. More willing to say sorry back. And that's the secret that nobody tells you. Apologizing is contagious. When you do it first, you give the other person permission to be human too. You break the standoff. You end the Cold War. Not with weapons. With two small sounds, I'm sorry. So here's my challenge to you. Think about one thing you're holding onto right now. One grudge. One fight. One silent treatment. And ask yourself, what would happen if you just said sorry first? Not because you're wrong. Not because you're weak. Because you're tired of being cold. Because you miss the warmth. Because 3 seconds of courage is cheaper than 3 more days of silence. I learned to say sorry like an adult. And it saved my marriage. Not overnight. Not magically. Slowly. One small apology at a time. Now let me ask you. What's stopping you from saying the first sorry? American culture hit me hard. Let me tell you about the laundry incident. Because if you really want to understand how American culture almost broke my marriage, you need to understand the laundry. We had been married for about 8 months. And every single week, we had the same fight. Not about money. Not about time. About laundry. Specifically, about whose turn it was to fold it. I know that sounds stupid. It was stupid. But here's what was actually happening underneath the stupid. I grew up in a culture where laundry was just done. By someone. Usually by the women in the family. Not because it was fair. Because that's just how it worked. You didn't fight about it. You didn't make a schedule. You just did it. So when I got married, I assumed, without ever saying it out loud, that laundry was my thing. Not because I wanted it to be. Because my brain had been trained since childhood to see laundry as woman's work. My husband grew up very differently. He grew up in an American household where everyone did their own laundry. His mom did hers. His dad did his. The kids did theirs. By the time he was 12, he knew how to separate colors and whites. So when we got married, he assumed, also without saying it out loud, that laundry was an individual responsibility. You wash your stuff. I wash mine. Easy. See the problem? We never talked about it. We just assumed. And assumptions, my friend, are the silent killers of love. So here's how it played out every week. I would do the laundry. All of it. His. Mine. The towels. The sheets. And then I would get resentful because he didn't help. He would come home from work, see me folding, and say, "You don't have to do mine." And I would hear, "I don't appreciate you." And he would see my face get tight and think, why is she angry? I told her she doesn't have to do it. We were speaking the same language. English. But we were not understanding each other. Because culture is not just about words. Culture is about the invisible rules you didn't even know you learned. This is the part that shocked me. In America, independence is a virtue. Being able to take care of yourself, your laundry, your money, your emotions, that's a sign of being a successful adult. My husband wasn't being lazy when he didn't do my laundry. He was being respectful. He thought he was honoring my independence by not touching my stuff. And I, coming from a more collective culture, saw that as rejection. In my head, love meant doing things for each other. Taking care of each other. Blurring the lines between yours and mine. So when he said, "You don't have to do mine," I heard, "I don't need you." And that broke my heart. We fought about laundry for months. Silent fights. The kind where no one yells, but the air gets thick and heavy. He would do his own laundry on Sunday. I would do mine on Monday. And we would pass each other in the hallway like two polite strangers sharing an apartment. One night, I finally snapped. Not dramatically. Quietly. I sat on the bed and said, "Why don't you want me to take care of you?" He looked confused. Genuinely confused. Like I had just asked him why water is wet. He said, "I do want you to take care of me. But I also want to take care of myself. That doesn't mean I don't love you." And in that moment, I realized something huge. American love looks different than the love I grew up with. It's not worse. It's not better. It's just different. And neither of us was wrong. We were just from different planets pretending to speak the same language. Here's the science. Your brain learns cultural rules the same way it learns grammar. You don't think about them. You just absorb them. And when someone breaks those rules, even accidentally, your brain sets off an alarm. Not a loud alarm. A quiet one. A feeling that something is off or wrong or not right. And most people, when they feel that alarm, assume the other person is being mean or lazy or selfish. They don't think, "Oh, maybe we have different cultural software running." That was us. Two people with different cultural software, blaming each other for bugs that weren't anyone's fault. So how did we fix it? We talked. Not about laundry. About values. I told him, "When you do your own laundry, I feel unnecessary." He told me, "When you do my laundry, I feel like a child." Both of those feelings were real. Both were valid. And neither one was wrong. So we made a deal. A stupid, simple, beautiful deal. We would do laundry together. Same time. Same room. He would wash. I would dry. He would fold. I would put away. Not because it was efficient. Because it was together. And together was the whole point. That was the first time I really understood that marriage in America is not about losing yourself in someone else. It's about two whole people choosing to share space without disappearing. And that was hard for me. Because I was raised to believe that love meant merging. Two become one. But in America, two become two who really like each other and pay bills together. I'm not saying one is better. I'm saying I had to learn a whole new way of loving. And learning is uncomfortable. Learning means admitting you were wrong. Learning means saying, "I don't understand," over and over again. If you're watching this and you're struggling with cultural differences, in your marriage, in your friendships, even in your English learning, here's what I need you to hear. The problem is not that you're different. The problem is that you're assuming they see the world the same way you do. They don't. And that's not a tragedy. That's an invitation. An invitation to be curious instead of angry. To ask instead of assume. To say, "Help me understand," instead of, "You're wrong." We don't fight about laundry anymore. Now we laugh about it. Because we finally learned that the laundry was never about the laundry. It was about two different ideas of love bumping into each other in a tiny apartment. And once we saw that, we could finally fold the towels in peace. So let me ask you. What's your laundry? What small, stupid thing is actually a cultural difference wearing a disguise? And are you brave enough to ask the real question instead of just getting frustrated? 2 kids, 0 sleep, 1,000 fights. Let me paint you a picture. It's 2 a.m. The baby is crying. Not a soft cry. A scream. The kind of scream that goes straight through your skull and into your soul. My husband is snoring. Actually snoring. Like a cartoon character. And I am standing in the dark, holding a tiny human who refuses to be put down, and I haven't slept more than 3 consecutive hours in 4 months. I am crying. Not beautiful crying. Ugly crying. Snot and tears and that weird shaky breathing you do when you're so tired you can't remember your own name. And in that moment, I am not thinking about love. I am not thinking about marriage. I am thinking, I made a terrible mistake. I ruined my life. I want to run away and never come back. That's the part nobody puts on the Christmas card. Nobody posts that on Instagram. Nobody says, look at me, I'm a mother, and I regret everything right now. But that was my reality. And it almost broke us. Here's what they don't tell you about having kids in America. They don't tell you about the isolation. In my home country, when you have a baby, your whole village shows up. Your mother stays for months. Your aunts cook. Your cousins clean. You are never alone. In America, you get a hospital bracelet, a car seat check, and a good luck. Maybe your mom visits for a week. Maybe your friends bring a casserole. And then you're alone. Just you, the baby, and the crushing weight of everything you don't know how to do. My husband went back to work after 2 weeks. 2 weeks. He didn't want to. He had to. We needed the money. So there I was, in our tiny apartment. With a newborn who wouldn't stop crying and a body that was still healing and a brain that was drowning in hormones. And my English, which was never perfect, turned into absolute garbage. I couldn't think. I couldn't speak. I couldn't remember simple words like bottle and sleep. I just cried. All the time. My husband came home every night to a wife who was either crying or angry or both. He didn't know what to do. He tried to help, but he always did it wrong. He held the baby wrong. He warmed the bottle wrong. He said the wrong thing. And I, in my exhausted, hormonal rage, told him he was wrong. Every single time. We fought about everything. We fought about who changed the last diaper. We fought about who got more sleep. We fought about the thermostat. We fought about nothing. Just noise and exhaustion and 2 people who used to like each other, now living in the same apartment like wounded animals. Here's the science part, because I know you need this. Sleep deprivation is not just feeling tired. Sleep deprivation is a form of torture. Literally. The Geneva Convention lists it as something you're not supposed to do to prisoners of war. And here we were, doing it to ourselves and each other for months. When you don't sleep, your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that handles impulse control, emotional regulation, and rational thinking, basically shuts down. And your amygdala, the fear and anger center, takes over. So you're not yourself. You're not thinking clearly. You're not being fair. You're a walking, talking, crying stress response. And here's the cruelest part. The person you love the most becomes the target. Because they're there. Because they're safe. Because you can't scream at your boss or your mother-in-law or the baby. So you scream at your spouse. And they scream back. And then you both feel terrible. And then the baby wakes up again. And the cycle continues. There was one night. One night I will never forget. It was maybe 3 in the morning. The baby had been crying for an hour. My husband was trying to help, but everything he did made it worse. And I just snapped. I looked at him and said, "I hate you. I hate this. I hate my life." I didn't mean it. I knew I didn't mean it even as I said it. But I said it anyway. Because I was so tired. So tired that the filter between my brain and my mouth had completely dissolved. He didn't say anything. He just looked at me, put the baby in the crib, and walked out of the room. He slept on the couch that night. And I cried alone in the bedroom, holding a pillow, convinced that I had just destroyed everything. The next morning, I didn't know what to say. How do you come back from, "I hate you"? How do you unsay something that awful? I made coffee. I put it on the table next to him. And I sat down. I didn't say anything for a long time. Neither did he. Finally, he said, "I know you didn't mean it." That was it. That was his gift to me. Grace. The kind of grace I didn't deserve. He didn't make me apologize. He didn't demand an explanation. He just forgave me. Before I even asked. And in that moment, I realized something. Love is not about never saying the wrong thing. Love is about staying after you do. Love is about looking at someone at their absolute worst, exhausted, angry, mean, broken, and choosing to see the person underneath. Not the words. Not the moment. The person. We didn't fix everything that day. We still fought. We still struggled. We still had 1,000 more stupid fights about nothing. But we stopped keeping score. We stopped holding grudges. Because we learned that parenthood is not a test of your love. It's a fire. And fire burns away everything that isn't real. And what's left? What's left is 2 people who have seen each other at 3 a.m., covered in baby vomit, crying on the bathroom floor, and who still choose to stay. If you're watching this and you're in the thick of it, the sleepless nights, the endless fights, the feeling that you've made a terrible mistake, I need you to hear this. You're not broken. You're not failing. You're just in the fire. And the fire doesn't last forever. But what you become in the fire, that lasts. We survived. Not because we were strong. Because we were too tired to leave. And sometimes, tired is enough. Sometimes, staying is the win. Sometimes, making coffee the next morning is the apology. Sometimes, "I know you didn't mean it," is the only prayer you need. So let me ask you. What's your 3 a.m. moment? What have you said that you can't take back? And who is still sitting at the table, waiting for you to stop being so hard on yourself? The question nobody asks. Here's a question nobody asked me when I was drowning. Not my mother. Not my friends. Not the internet. Nobody asked, "Do you even like yourself right now?" Everyone asked about the baby. Is he sleeping? Is he eating? Is he hitting his milestones? Everyone asked about my husband. Is he helping? Is he working hard? Is he being supportive? Everyone asked about the marriage. Are you okay? Are you fighting? Are you going to make it? Nobody asked about me. Not the real me. The me under the exhaustion and the hormones and the resentment. That me was gone. And I didn't even notice until one day, I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the person looking back. Let me describe her to you. She had dark circles under her eyes. She wore the same sweatpants for 3 days in a row. She hadn't showered in 48 hours. She couldn't remember the last time she laughed at something that wasn't a meme on her phone. She was angry all the time. Not angry at anyone specific. Just angry. At the world. At her life. At herself for feeling angry in the first place. That woman in the mirror was me. And I hated her. Here's the thing nobody tells you about marriage and parenthood and growing up. You can lose yourself so slowly that you don't even notice it's happening. It's not like a car crash. It's like a fog. You wake up one day and realize you haven't done anything you love in months. You haven't called a friend just to talk. You haven't read a book. You haven't taken a walk by yourself. You haven't had a thought that wasn't about the baby, the house, the money, or the marriage. You've become a machine. A tired, resentful, boring machine. And when you don't like yourself, you can't love anyone else. Not really. Because love requires energy. Love requires patience. Love requires a self to give. And when that self is empty, all you have left is obligation. And obligation is not love. Obligation is just going through the motions until you die or get divorced. That's where I was. Going through the motions. Waking up. Making bottles. Changing diapers. Fighting with my husband. Going to sleep. Repeating. I wasn't living. I was surviving. And surviving is not a life. It's just a longer death. So here's the question I finally had to ask myself, alone in the bathroom at 2 a.m. while the baby slept for 45 miraculous minutes. If nothing changes, can I do this for 50 more years? The answer was no. Absolutely not. I would rather be alone than live like this forever. And that scared me more than anything. Because I didn't want to leave. I loved my husband. I loved my baby. But I didn't love my life. And that felt like a betrayal. Like I was a bad wife and a bad mother for even thinking it. But here's what I've learned since then. Wanting more than survival is not betrayal. It's honesty. And honesty is the only thing that saves anything. Let me give you some science. Psychologists have a concept called emotional labor. It's the work of managing your own emotions and the emotions of the people around you. In marriage, especially in the early years of parenthood, women often do way more emotional labor than men. Not because men are bad. Because someone has to do it, and women are socialized to be the emotional caretakers. So you're not just taking care of the baby. You're taking care of your husband's feelings. You're taking care of your mother-in-law's opinions. You're taking care of your own guilt. And at some point, the tank runs dry. There's nothing left. You become a shell. And shells don't love. Shells just exist. That was me. A shell. And I hated it. So what did I do? I didn't do anything dramatic. I didn't leave. I didn't have an affair. I didn't join a cult. I did something much harder. I started telling the truth. Small truths at first. I'm not okay. I need help. I don't know who I am anymore. My husband didn't know what to do with those truths. Nobody had ever taught him how to respond to, I don't know who I am. So he did what most people do. He tried to fix it. He said, you're a great mom. He said, you're beautiful. He said, I love you. All true. All unhelpful. Because the person who needed to fix me wasn't him. It was me. I had to find myself again. Not the old me. That person was gone. She died somewhere between the first labor contraction and the third month of no sleep. But a new me was possible. A different me. A me who had been through something hard and survived. A me who knew things I didn't know before. A me who could be tired and still kind. Angry and still loving. Lost and still searching. Finding her took time. It took small steps. I started taking 10 minutes a day to do something just for me. Not for the baby. Not for my husband. Not for the house. For me. I read one page of a book. I wrote one sentence in a journal. I stood outside and looked at the sky. Just 10 minutes. That's all. And slowly, like a plant coming back to life after a drought, I started to feel like a person again. Here's what I need you to hear. If you're watching this and you don't like yourself right now, if you're tired and angry and empty and you don't recognize the person in the mirror, you're not broken. You're just dehydrated. Not of water. Of yourself. You've been giving and giving and giving, and you forgot to keep something for you. And that's not selfish. That's survival. You cannot pour from an empty cup. That's not a metaphor. That's biology. Your brain needs rest. Your heart needs joy. Your soul needs silence. I didn't save my marriage by trying harder. I saved my marriage by saving myself. I stopped being a martyr. I started being a person. And when I became a person again, I could finally love my husband the way he deserved. Not from obligation. From fullness. From choice. So let me ask you the question nobody asked me. Do you even like yourself right now? And if the answer is no, what are you going to do about it? Not tomorrow. Not when the baby sleeps through the night. Not when you have more money. Today. What are you going to do today? Small words, big fixes. Let me teach you a magic trick. It takes 3 seconds. It costs nothing. And it can stop a fight before it becomes a war. Are you ready? Here it is. When you feel that hot wave of anger rising in your chest, when you know you're about to say something you'll regret, just say these 2 words. I'm stuck. That's it. Not, you're wrong. Not, you always do this. Not a dramatic sigh or a slammed door. Just, I'm stuck. 2 small words that mean, I don't know how to fix this right now. I'm not blaming you. I'm not running away. I'm just stuck. And I need a minute. I learned this trick from a marriage counselor we started seeing after the baby almost broke us. Yes, we went to therapy. No, it wasn't embarrassing. It was the smartest thing we ever did. And on our second session, the therapist taught us something that changed everything. She said, most fights aren't about what you think they're about. They're about your nervous system getting hijacked. And once the hijack happens, no amount of logic or love will fix it. You have to stop the hijack first. Here's the science. When you feel attacked, even if the attack is just your partner saying, "Can you please put your cup in the sink," in a slightly annoyed tone, your amygdala activates. That's your brain's alarm system. It doesn't know the difference between a real threat and a perceived one. It just knows danger. So it floods your body with cortisol and adrenaline. Your heart rate goes up. Your breathing gets shallow. Your hearing literally changes. You stop being able to process tone and nuance, and you only hear the words, usually the worst ones. This is called amygdala hijack. And when you're hijacked, you cannot have a productive conversation. You cannot listen. You cannot be fair. You can only fight, flee, or freeze. That's why "I'm stuck" works. Because it's not an argument. It's not a defense. It's a pause button. It tells your partner, "I'm not fighting you. I'm fighting my own brain right now. Give me 3 minutes." And those 3 minutes allow your cortisol to start dropping. Your prefrontal cortex, the smart, rational part of your brain, comes back online. And then you can actually talk. We started using this in our marriage. And I cannot tell you how many fights it prevented. One night, we were arguing about something stupid, I don't even remember what, and I felt that hot wave. I felt my jaw tighten. I felt my throat close up. I knew I was about to say something mean. So I said, "I'm stuck. I need 5 minutes." And I walked into the bedroom. I sat on the bed. I breathed. In through my nose for 4 seconds. Hold for 4. Out through my mouth for 4. I did that 10 times. And when I came back out, I didn't even remember why I was angry. The hijack was over. The fight was gone. But here's the thing. "I'm stuck" only works if you use it before you explode. Once the mean words come out, once you've called names or brought up old wounds or made that cutting remark you know will hurt, the damage is done. You can still fix it. But it's harder. So the real skill is catching yourself in that tiny window. That 3-second window between feeling the anger and expressing it. That window is where marriages are saved or destroyed. Let me tell you about another small word that fixed huge things. Thanks. Not a big, dramatic thank you. Just a small, specific one. Thanks for taking out the trash. Thanks for making coffee this morning. Thanks for not waking me up when the baby cried. Sounds simple, right? But here's what I learned. In the early years of our marriage, I said thanks for big things. For birthdays. For anniversaries. For emergencies. But I almost never said thanks for the small, boring, daily things. Because in my head, those things were just responsibilities. You're supposed to take out the trash. Why should I thank you for doing what you're supposed to do? That was a mistake. A huge one. Here's the science again. Gratitude triggers the release of oxytocin, the bonding hormone. When you say, "thank you," and you mean it, your partner's brain literally feels more connected to you. It's not just politeness. It's neurology. And the more you do it, the more your brain rewires itself to look for things to be grateful for instead of things to complain about. That's not toxic positivity. That's training. Your brain is a muscle. You can train it to see problems, or you can train it to see gifts. The choice is yours. So I started a small experiment. Every night, before we went to sleep, would say one thing I was grateful for about my husband. Not a big thing. A small thing. Thank you for putting the baby to bed tonight. Thank you for not getting annoyed when I forgot to buy milk. Thank you for still being here. At first, it felt forced. Fake. Like I was reading from a script. But I kept doing it. And after about 2 weeks, something shifted. I started noticing things during the day. I started seeing him differently. Not as a roommate who sometimes annoyed me. As a partner who was trying. And that shift saved us. My husband noticed too. He started doing it back. And suddenly, our little apartment didn't feel so cold anymore. The silences weren't weapons. They were just silences. The fights weren't wars. They were just disagreements. Small words. That's all it took. Not big gestures. Not expensive gifts. Not dramatic apologies on one knee. Just, I'm stuck and thanks and sometimes I was wrong. Let me be real with you. This didn't fix everything overnight. We still had bad days. We still had fights. We still said things we regretted. But the recovery time got shorter. The cold wars got warmer. The space between the fight and the forgiveness got smaller. And eventually, I realized that we weren't just surviving anymore. We were actually, okay. So here's my challenge to you. Pick one small word. Just one. Sorry. Thanks. Stuck. Help. And use it today. Not tomorrow. Not when you have more time. Today. Use it in a moment when you would normally get angry or silent or mean. Just one small word. See what happens. You might be surprised. Because love doesn't live in grand speeches. Love lives in the small words you say when you're tired and scared and still choose to be kind. Now, let me tell you about the year everything changed. The year we stopped fighting about money and started dancing in the kitchen. From roommates to lovers again. Let me tell you about the year we stopped being roommates. Because that's what we had become. Not enemies. Not lovers. Just two people sharing a fridge, splitting the bills, and coordinating schedules like business partners. We said good morning and good night and almost nothing in between. We sat on opposite ends of the couch. We watched TV without talking. We went to bed at different times. We were polite. We were efficient. We were dead inside. And here's the scary part. I didn't even notice it happening. It was so slow. Like a pot of water coming to a boil. One day, I looked up from my phone, I was always on my phone, and realized I hadn't had a real conversation with my husband in weeks. Not about feelings. Not about dreams. Not about anything that mattered. Just logistics. Who's picking up the kids? Did you pay the electric bill? We're out of milk. That was our marriage. A grocery list with a ring on it. How did we get here? The same way everyone gets here. Life. Kids. Work. Exhaustion. The slow erosion of attention. We stopped dating. We stopped touching. We stopped laughing. We stopped being curious about each other. And once curiosity dies, love doesn't die immediately. It just goes into a coma. You can still function. You can still parent. You can still pay the mortgage. But you're not really there. You're just going through the motions, waiting for something to wake you up. I read something once that punched me in the gut. A researcher named John Gottman studied thousands of couples. He found that the ones who stayed in love weren't the ones who never fought. They were the ones who turned toward each other in small moments. He called them bids. A bid is a small attempt to connect. A look. A touch. A comment about something random. And the couples who stayed in love noticed those bids and responded to them. The ones who got divorced ignored them. Over and over again, they ignored them. Until there were no more bids. Because why would you keep reaching for someone who never reaches back? I realized I had been ignoring bids for years. Not on purpose. Just because I was tired. Just because I was distracted. Just because I assumed he would always be there. So when he said, "Look at this funny video," I didn't look. When he touched my shoulder in the kitchen, I didn't lean in. When he asked, "How was your day?" I said, "Fine," and walked away. I wasn't mean. I was just absent. And absence is a slow poison. So I decided to do something. Not a big thing. A small, weird, embarrassing thing. I decided to dance with him in the kitchen. It sounds stupid, I know. But here's the backstory. When we were first dating, we used to dance in his tiny apartment kitchen. Not real dancing. Just holding each other and swaying to bad music. It was stupid and silly and it made us laugh. And somewhere in the years of babies and bills and exhaustion, we stopped. I couldn't even remember the last time we had danced. So one night, after the kids were asleep, I put on that same bad song from 10 years ago. And I walked into the kitchen where he was doing dishes. I turned off the water. I took the sponge out of his hand. And I said, "Dance with me." He looked at me like I had grown a second head. What? Dance with me? Right now? 3 minutes. He laughed. Not a happy laugh. An uncomfortable laugh. The kind of laugh you do when someone is being weird and you don't know how to respond. But he didn't say no. He put his hands on my waist. I put my arms around his neck. And we swayed. Badly. Out of rhythm. The dog stared at us like we were insane. It was awkward and clumsy and nothing like the movies. But here's what happened. I started crying. Not sad crying. Weird crying. Because I realized I had forgotten what his shoulders felt like. I had forgotten the weight of his arms. I had forgotten how he smelled. Not because he changed. Because I stopped noticing. I had been living next to him for years but not really being with him. And in that stupid, awkward kitchen dance, I remembered. He was still there. The same person I married. Not perfect. Not a fairy tale. But real. And he was still choosing to stay. We didn't have a magical transformation after that. We didn't suddenly become the perfect couple. But something shifted. A crack opened in the wall we had built. And light started coming in. We started dancing every night. Not long. Just one song. Sometimes we talked. Sometimes we didn't. Sometimes we laughed. Sometimes we just held each other and breathed. It became our ritual. Our tiny rebellion against the roommate life. And slowly, so slowly I almost didn't notice, we started finding our way back to each other. Here's the science. Rituals matter to your brain. They create predictability and safety. Like asking, "How was your day?" and actually listening, your brain starts to associate your partner with safety instead of stress. Oxytocin increases. Cortisol decreases. Your nervous system calms down. And when your nervous system is calm, you can be curious. You can be kind. You can be generous. You can be the person you actually want to be, instead of the tired, defensive, scared person you became. We didn't fix everything. We still have bad days. We still fight. We still annoy each other. But we're not roommates anymore. We're partners. And the difference is not in the big moments. It's in the small ones. The kitchen dance. The goodnight kiss that lasts longer than 2 seconds. The hand on the back when walking past. The "I see you" in 1,000 tiny ways. If you're watching this and you feel like you're living with a roommate instead of a lover, I need you to hear this. It's not too late. But you have to do something. Not a big thing. A small thing. Turn off the TV. Put down the phone. Look at them. Touch them. Say something real. Dance in the kitchen. It will be awkward. It will feel stupid. Do it anyway. Because the alternative, the silent, polite, efficient roommate life, is not a marriage. It's a slow goodbye. So let me ask you. When was the last time you danced with your person? And if you can't remember, what are you going to do about it tonight? What my kids taught me about love. Let me tell you about the best teachers I never paid for. They're 3 feet tall. They eat chicken nuggets for breakfast if I let them. They cry when their socks feel wrong. And they have taught me more about love than any marriage counselor, any self-help book, or any wedding vow ever did. I'm talking about my kids. Before I had children, I thought I knew what love was. I thought it was a feeling. A warm, fuzzy, romantic feeling that made you want to write poetry and buy flowers. Then I had kids, and I realized I had no idea what I was talking about. Because the love you feel for your children is not warm and fuzzy. It's terrifying. It's raw. It's the kind of love that makes you check if they're breathing in the middle of the night. The kind of love that makes you willing to step in front of a car without thinking. The kind of love that has nothing to do with feelings and everything to do with showing up. Every single day. Even when you're tired. Even when you're angry. Even when you haven't slept in 3 days and they just spilled juice on the couch for the 3rd time. That's what my kids taught me. That love is not a feeling. Love is a verb. And if you can love a tiny screaming human who just bit you, you can love anyone. But here's the specific lesson I want to share with you. The one that changed my marriage more than anything else. My kids taught me how to apologize. Not the adult way, the real way. The way that actually fixes things. One day, my son was maybe 4 years old. He did something wrong. I don't even remember what. Probably hit his sister or took her toy. I got mad. I yelled. I sent him to his room. And 10 minutes later, when I went to check on him, he was sitting on his bed, crying. Not the fake crying. The real crying. The kind where your whole body shakes. I sat down next to him. I said, "Are you ready to say sorry?" And he looked at me with these huge, wet eyes and said, "I already said sorry in my heart. But you were too loud to hear it." I froze. I didn't know what to say. Because he was right. I was too loud. I was so busy being right, so busy punishing, so busy proving that I was the parent and he was the child, that I never stopped to listen. He had already apologized. Not with words. With his heart. And I missed it because I was yelling. That moment broke something in me. In a good way. I realized that for years, I had been doing the same thing to my husband. He would try to apologize, maybe with a touch, maybe with a joke, maybe with a "did you see that funny thing?" And I would miss it. Because I was waiting for the perfect words. The dramatic apology. The grand gesture. And while I was waiting, I was ignoring all the small, real, imperfect attempts he was making every single day. My son taught me that an apology doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be real. It can be clumsy. It can be awkward. It can be, I said sorry in my heart but you were too loud to hear it. That's still an apology. And if you're too busy being right, you'll miss it. And missing it is how love dies. Here's another lesson from my kids. They fight. Oh my God, do they fight? They fight about toys. They fight about who gets the blue cup. They fight about nothing. Real fights. Screaming, crying, I hate you fights. But here's the thing. 10 minutes later, they're playing together again. Not because they talked it through. Not because they processed their feelings. Because they have the memory of a goldfish and the forgiveness of a saint. They don't hold grudges. They don't bring up old fights. They don't keep score. They just move on. I watched this happen 100 times before I realized, they're doing something I can't do. I can hold a grudge for weeks. I can remember every mean thing my husband said in 2019. I can replay arguments in my head like a movie I've watched 1,000 times. But my kids? They fight, they cry, they say sorry, or not, and then they go back to building Legos together like nothing happened. And you know what? Nothing did happen. Not really. The fight was never about the toy. It was about being tired or hungry or overwhelmed. And once that passed, the fight passed too. But adults, we don't let it pass. We grab onto the fight like a life raft. We build stories around it. We make it mean something about the relationship. We turn a bad moment into a bad week into a bad year. My kids taught me that most fights are just weather. They come. They go. And you don't have to build a monument to every storm. Here's the science. Children's brains are still developing the prefrontal cortex, the part that handles impulse control, long-term planning, and emotional regulation. That's why they can't stop themselves from hitting and then forgive each other 5 minutes later. Their brains literally don't hold grudges the way adult brains do. But here's the thing. Adult brains can learn to let go too. It's called neuroplasticity. Your brain can rewire itself. You can train yourself to forgive faster, to hold grudges lighter, to stop replaying old fights. It takes practice. But it's possible. And my kids were my teachers. I started watching them more closely. When they fought, I noticed what they did afterwards. Sometimes they said sorry. Sometimes they didn't. Sometimes they just handed the other kid a toy. Sometimes they just started playing a new game and the old fight disappeared. They didn't have a script. They didn't have rules. They just repaired. Naturally. Instinctively. Because connection is more important to them than being right. That's what I started doing in my marriage. After a fight, instead of waiting for the perfect apology, I just handed my husband a cup of coffee. That was my toy. That was my, let's play a new game. And you know what? It worked. Not every time. But most of the time. Because underneath the fight, underneath the anger and the pride and the exhaustion, we both wanted the same thing. To stop fighting. To feel okay again. To be on the same team. My kids taught me that love is not complicated. Adults make it complicated. We add rules and conditions and scorecards. We say, I'll forgive you when you say sorry the right way. We say, I'll be nice when you deserve it. We turn love into a transaction. But kids just love. Imperfectly. Messily. Immediately. And then they move on. So here's my question for you. What would change if you loved like a child? If you forgave without a script? If you handed someone a cup of coffee instead of a lecture? If you stopped keeping score and just started playing again? My kids saved my marriage. Not by being perfect. By being real. And if you're watching this and you feel like love is too hard, too complicated, too broken, maybe you just need to get smaller. Not smaller in your life. Smaller in your pride. Smaller in your grudges. Small enough to say sorry in your heart and mean it. Small enough to hand someone a cup of coffee and call it peace. Now let me tell you how the story ends. Spoiler, it's not a fairy tale. It's better. It's boring. And boring, I've learned, is the secret to everything. The happy end is boring. Let me tell you how our story ends. Not with a fireworks display. Not with a dramatic airport reunion. Not with a perfect apology that fixes everything in one beautiful sentence. No. Our story ends with me sitting on the couch at 9 p.m. on a Tuesday, wearing the same sweatpants I've worn for 3 days. While my husband watches a documentary about trains. Trains. He loves trains. I do not care about trains. But I'm sitting next to him anyway. And my hand is on his knee. And his hand is on mine. And nobody is saying anything profound. And somehow, that's the happy ending. I know that sounds disappointing. When you hear happy ending, you probably imagine something dramatic. A final realization. A tearful hug. A promise whispered in the dark. But real happy endings are not like that. Real happy endings are boring. They're ordinary. They're Tuesday nights on the couch with someone who has seen you at your absolute worst and decided to stay anyway. So let me answer the question I asked at the very beginning. The question that woke me up that morning under the shower. Can love survive challenges? Yes. But not the way you think. Love survives challenges not because the challenges make you stronger. Sometimes challenges just make you tired. Sometimes they make you mean. Sometimes they make you want to run away and never come back. Love survives not because of the big moments, the weddings, the anniversaries, the dramatic apologies. Love survives because of the boring moments. The small, ordinary, forgettable moments where you choose each other when there's no reason to. When you're not feeling it. When you're exhausted and resentful and pretty sure they left their socks on the floor again. You choose them anyway. Not because of a feeling. Because of a decision. That's what I learned. Love is not a feeling you fall into. Love is a decision you make over and over and over again. Every morning. Every fight. Every boring Tuesday night. You decide to stay. You decide to be kind. You decide to hand them a cup of coffee instead of a lecture. And those decisions, thousands of them, millions of them, add up to a life. I married young. I was 20 years old and I had no idea what I was doing. I thought love would be easy. I thought love would be enough. I was wrong on both counts. Love is not easy. And love alone is not enough. You need something else. You need stubbornness. You need humility. You need the ability to say, I'm sorry, when you'd rather be right. You need the wisdom to know that most fights are not worth winning. You need the courage to dance in the kitchen when you'd rather scroll on your phone. And you need to learn English. Not perfect English. Not academic English. Just enough English to say the important things. I'm scared. I need help. That hurt me. Thank you for staying. I love you even when I'm angry. Those are the only phrases that matter. And you can learn them. You don't need a degree. You don't need to sound like a native speaker. You just need to be willing to sound stupid. To make mistakes. To say the wrong thing and try again. That's not weakness. That's courage. And courage is the language of love. So here I am. Years later. Still married. Still struggling sometimes. Still learning. But here's the difference. I don't panic anymore when things get hard. I don't assume every fight is the end. I don't look at my husband and wonder if I made a mistake. Because I know now that struggle is not a sign of failure. Struggle is a sign of reality. Real love struggles. Real English learners struggle. Real humans struggle. The question is not, how do I avoid struggle? The question is, who do I want to struggle with? I chose him. And every day, I choose him again. Not because it's easy. Because it's worth it. And boring Tuesday nights on the couch, watching a documentary about trains, are worth more than all the dramatic movie endings in the world. If you're watching this and you're in the middle of your own struggle, with love, with English, with life, I need you to hear this. You don't need a perfect ending. You just need to not quit before the boring part. The boring part is where everything good actually lives. The boring part is waking up next to the same person for the 10,000th time. The boring part is saying, good morning, even when you're not a morning person. The boring part is making coffee, folding laundry, paying bills, and still finding a reason to laugh. That's not boring. That's sacred. That's the whole point. So can love survive challenges? Yes. But only if you stop waiting for the challenges to end. They don't end. Life is just one challenge after another. The question is whether you face them together or alone. And together, even when it's hard, even when you're tired, even when you'd rather be anywhere else, together is always better. That's my story. That's my happy ending. It's not a fairy tale. It's not a movie. It's just a Tuesday night on the couch with a man who loves trains and a woman who loves him. And somehow, that's more than enough. So here we are. End of the story. But also, not the end. Because your story is still being written. And that's the part that keeps me up at night, in a good way. You just watched me struggle through young marriage, broken English, sleepless nights, grocery store fights, and a love that almost didn't make it. But here's the truth I didn't tell you until now. This video was never really about me. It was about you. Every time I said, I was scared, you felt it. Every time I said, I almost quit, you knew that feeling. And every time I said, I stayed, something in you whispered, maybe I can stay too. That whisper is real. Don't ignore it. Here's what's coming next on this channel. More real stories. More messy, honest, imperfect English. More lessons from life, not from textbooks. Because you don't learn a language by memorizing rules. You learn it by living. By feeling. By hearing someone say, I married young and almost failed, and realizing, that's your sentence too. So here's my call to action. Not a fake, smash that like button. A real one. Subscribe. Not because I want a number. Because you want more stories like this one. Stories that teach you English while teaching you how to be human. Stories that don't make you feel stupid for struggling. Stories that stay with you after the video ends. Comment one word. Just one. The word that describes where you are right now. Tired. Hopeful. Stuck. Fighting. Alive. One word. I read every single comment. And your one word might be the exact word someone else needs to hear today. Share this video with one person. The person who needs to know that love can survive challenges. The person who's learning English and wants to give up. The person who thinks their story is too messy to matter. Send it to them. Say, this reminded me of you. Because here's the secret that YouTube doesn't tell you. The algorithm doesn't change lives. People do. And you are the people. So I'll see you in the next video. Same channel. Same messy honesty. Same slow English. New story. New lesson. New chance to stay. Until then, keep struggling. Keep loving. Keep speaking. And never, ever quit before the boring part. Subscribe. Comment. Share. And remember, your English doesn't have to be perfect to be powerful.